Three, two, one. We are live. We are talking all things boxing, and we are talking about the great modern boxer Terence Crawford, who now quite obviously goes up there with guys like Ray Leonard and Ray Robinson, Floyd Mayweather. He's one of the greatest boxers ever. He's the greatest welterweight since Floyd Mayweather. And one could even make a case about him versus Mayweather because fighting Canelo Alvarez at a weight that Canelo's proven to be good at is quite a ballsy move that I'm not quite sure we ever saw Floyd do, especially in the second half of his career. We saw Floyd take those risks with certain guys. Chico Corrales comes to mind, but we never saw Floyd take that super risk where the fighter felt comfortable at the weight, moving up in weight late in his career. And I think it creates a great water cooler discussion moving on. This is my co-host Dakota. He's a wonderful guy. How you doing, Dakota?
I'm doing good, brother, man. A late fucking night for us on the East Coast last night.
Yeah, it was 2 a.m. Go. Really, we'll get into the production of this. We got to kind of keep this short because I got somewhere to be at a certain point. But I think it's interesting, right? Because to me, it was a very fun fight to watch because of the level of intensity and the feeling of, can Crawford keep doing what he's doing, and will Canelo land a big, meaningful shot? I thought it was a high drama fight from the standpoint of, is a punch going to change the outcome of the fight? I saw a completely different fight than you did. I think it's a very interesting fight because I've talked to many different people and they've seen different fights. The fight I saw was Crawford pretty much just dominated him. He might have lost 2-3 rounds on my card, but I saw Crawford dictating the action, the busier fighter, and really controlling the grounds of where the fight was contested at. I didn't see Canelo having, if he won a round, I felt like Crawford immediately won the following round. I didn't see a fight that was necessarily competitive in scoring, but I saw one that had major, like, opera level drama in terms of, is Canelo going to land a punch that changes this fight? Now I'd like to introduce your perspective, which I think you saw a different fight.
I did. I mean, I don't think we saw completely different fights, right? But I felt like the scores that were turned in were close to reality. I felt like they were an accurate depiction of the fight itself. I felt like, as much as everything you said about what Terence did was true, I felt like Canelo's body work was really effective, and when they were exchanging on the inside, they were on even playing field, it seemed to me, in many of those exchanges. And I felt like, especially, a lot of it could depend on how you feel about some of those early rounds, where I did feel like Canelo's body work was effective. I did feel like a lot of his foot pressure at times did make the ring small for Terence, and he had to work for it. But he's got gears. That's always been, we've been saying that for years, right? Like, Terence has gears, and you make the adjustment, he's going to make the adjustment to the adjustment. And I felt like he did that enough times, and we were talking about this before the show, that by the end of the fight, it felt like there was a level of frustration in Canelo. You could see something kind of break mentally for him, and he had sort of like a fuck this thing that we haven't really seen out of him. And in retrospect, with him clearly losing the 12th, had he stuck it out and potentially won the 12th round, the fight would have been a draw. I'm not talking about opinion or how you see the fight. That's just a fact. If he had won the 12th round, the fight's a draw. But Terence, being the special fighter that he is, stayed engaged, never was affected by Canelo's power, gave him the little Terence head nod, like that was a good one. But Canelo's power never impacted the fight in the way that I thought it had the potential to. And Terence had a tremendous performance.
So because this is the most marquee thing, and we're probably going to talk about this for a good 15 minutes, I'm going to share more of my thoughts. The power wasn't an issue because of Crawford's speed. I think Canelo never fully felt comfortable being reckless because he got hit with punches he didn't see coming. And a good example is when he got caught with that straight left coming into the ropes. I don't think he saw those punches coming. And he was trying, I think there was a lot of what I found interesting was foot feints. They were feigning the feints. So Canelo's trying to feint Crawford to set up his power shot, and Crawford was feigning Canelo's feint, which to the novice fight fan looks like they're just standing there. But what they were really doing was they were battling for foot position. They were battling to engage on setting up a power shot, which doesn't come out of nowhere. So there, to me, I think it was Canelo never felt comfortable with the speed coming back. But I also think at a certain point in the fight, around the 9th fight, when the head clash happened, which I thought really changed the fight mentally for Canelo. I never thought he re-engaged in the fight. I think he showed frustration in that moment. Why don't you speak?
Just real quick, Lukey, I think that's where we agree for sure. I felt like that was the stretch of the fight. Maybe Canelo won the 10th or one of those rounds, but that last stretch of the fight for me was where Terence really separated himself.
Well, I've never seen, even in the Bivol fight, Canelo just being so frustrated. And to me, the frustration stemmed from every opponent except for Floyd, maybe. I think and Golovkin in parts, and it's weird because Golovkin doesn't have a win over him. He could read what they were doing, I think. So he could be like, okay, if they do this, I can set up and look to land this. I think his frustration didn't necessarily come from the speed or his inability to do things. It was that he didn't trust his instincts with Crawford to close the distance and shoot a counter shot because he had gotten hit guessing wrong. And I think that his frustration was, this is not supposed to be this hard. Like, I'm supposed to be going downhill at this point in the fight. I'm supposed to be pushing you back. And if anything, Crawford got stronger and stood with Canelo longer the later in the fight, which I think most people assumed Canelo would do.
Yeah, I mean, for me, in the version of the fight that I saw Terence winning, I just saw him kind of outlasting Canelo, and I ultimately kind of feel like that's what happened. He was able to stay engaged physically and mentally for the entire duration of the fight, and he made an all-time great show signs of frustration that you don't see, in fighters of that caliber very often, especially in what I perceived as a close fight in the moment.
So now let's go to the annoying talking head thing, right? Annoying talking head segment. Just how great is Terence Crawford? Like, where do you rank him after this win? He's like, I think it's him and Usyk are obviously the two best guys of this era right now, pretty easily. I don't think anyone can argue anything other than that. What they've done is remarkable. But if Dakota were to write a book called like the 50 best boxers, where is Crawford realistically? And I got to put a caveat, right? Because when we do this,
Get myself oriented here, folks. I'm sorry.
His fights are in HD, so that automatically moves you down on the list because if you're going to be on the top 5, you got to have non-HD fights. His fights were in color, so that means that he's probably not going to be revered and he's not historic, right?
We're going to hear somebody say that Barney Ross would have beaten Terence Crawford, some fucking,
Well, do you get what I'm saying? Like, because he had an HD fight, if we have, like, Usyk can't be a top 5 heavyweight because his fights were in HD and they were accessible, where do you put Crawford amongst genuinely the best fighters ever?
I'm kind of working through that because there's things about a pound for pound conversation that start to become about opinion, I think. And I think Terence, if I'm just going off the eyeball test, might be the best, if not one of the 5 best fighters I've ever watched. I really feel that highly about him. This win is incredible, and I think supplements in terms of if I'm looking at his resume, I feel like it supplements years of being avoided and years of guys understanding what a high risk fight he was
and trying to not make fights with him, hold him out, diminish his legacy. I think that's part 100%. Of his career is that there were periods of times where people strategically moved away from him and then laughed at his resume because he couldn't get the scintillating fights.
100%. I think the flip side of that for me, and I guess just as a baseline, I agree. He has a seat at the table with all the legends, right? Last night, if you didn't already have him, with a seat at the table, he more than earned his seat. But when I go around to other of his contemporaries or other legends, there isn't, I don't want people to take this the wrong way. There isn't the volume of signature wins that other greats have. I can point to 2 with Terence that are all-time great wins, but outside of those 2 fights, and who's on that resume and when they were there, I feel like history will go, that's what holds him back from, being at the top of every list ever. You know what I mean?
I
Because
think
he had
that
that
for
kind of
me,
skill set.
what I think is Crawford beat a lot of guys and they were never the same. Mean Machine, never the same. Yuriorkis Gamboa, never the same. Victor Postal, Bad Boy, never the same. I think part of the flip side to what you're saying is Crawford fought some guys. Thomas Delorme was a solid up-and-comer, and then he beats him, never the same. I think there's another way to look at it is he fought a lot of guys who never, after fighting Crawford, ever had a performance remotely similar to what they were doing before Crawford.
That's definitely true. He definitely had a thing about him like Lomachenko had, where he didn't just fuck you up, he kind of fucked your head up because you thought things were going to go one type of way and they just weren't going that way. And all of those guys you mentioned are tremendous fighters. There's 2 different conversations, right? If I'm just using this as an example, if you ask me him versus Floyd in a fight in their prime, that's a difficult question. I'd really have to sit and think about that, and I might even lean Terence after this kind of.
I mean, it's the best barbershop conversation ever.
But the flip side of that is, whose resume am I taking? This one win for me doesn't put him at a Floyd resume. It doesn't put him at a Pacquiao resume. It doesn't put him at a Canelo resume, at least to me, in terms of the names. If you want to talk about hardware and belts, there's an argument for that. But I think that's the one part of it that I struggle with, is he has a seat at the table with all the legends, and there's something different about his resume because he never got to be the guy.
Well, I think he dealt with the politics of boxing. I mean, I think the comparison I would make is Marvin Hagler. He's like Hagler, but without a loss. Because if you look at Hagler's resume, up until he got his big fights, he really didn't have a resume. He had to go overseas like Crawford to win a belt, but he never got those fights because he was someone that I think a lot of the big name fighters didn't want to fight unless there was real money behind. So I think that, to me, he enters a level above Hagler. So he fills that historic sense, but he's like a higher on the ranking version of Hagler. He's like the best form of Hagler.
I think that's fair.
It's interesting, man, because to me, he essentially went up 21 pounds and beat a generational great in Canelo. And he didn't make it look all that hard. Like, it's not a fight where you'd say, man, that was a grueling back and forth war. Even if you saw a competitive fight, I would have expected the physicality of the fight to wear on him. It looked like Canelo was the one that took more damage, honestly, leaving the fight. And he was the bigger man.
But he took more damage because Terence was sharper, and he was able, like we said, to separate in the back part of the fight. The big thing about Canelo to me that's changed is he's kind of one and done. Like, he's still fast. He's still got pretty good feet. He's still moves his head well. There's a lot of the old Canelo that's still there, but Canelo used to put certain combinations together against guys, and you could see them kind of go, what the fuck was that? And that guy doesn't really exist anymore. The offensive creativity isn't there, and he sort of sets you up for one big good one. And then that's kind of what he's got, unless you're exchanging. And I think that Terence was able to capitalize on that.
I think the other thing about Canelo, it kind of piggybacks off of you, and then I want to get into the legacy around Canelo, is he's someone where I don't think he wants to go to third and fourth gear. I don't think he wants to be breathing hard in a fight anymore. I think he wants to almost spar, but with mostly power shots, and he wants to fight at a comfortable pace for him. And I think because of that, you don't see him open up. You don't see those combinations, because I think always in the back of his mind, he's like, I don't want to I don't want to have to push through something. And I think that that's kind of what was interesting about 10, 11, 12 was you could see him being like, I didn't want this fight to go this way.
Right. Who was more comfortable being uncomfortable? It was clearly Terence. Clearly.
Yeah. And I think that I've picked up on this since the Bivol fight. David Benavidez has been a great name for Canelo to face. And honestly, at the time when he was taking other opponents, it was a 50-50 fight. And the fact that Canelo never took that fight, to me, always rubbed me wrong because it really felt on paper as a 50-50 fight. And I think that not facing David Benavidez when Canelo has a whole history of taking on good opposition, to me, always kind of told me that he's in a different stage of his career because it's just not a very Canelo thing. He fought Austin Trout. He fought Erislandy Lara. He fought friggin' Floyd. He always kind of took on challenges. He fought Golovkin, albeit he tried to wait him out. He still fought him 3 times, 2 of which he won. That always kind of told me that something had changed with him because it's not a very Canelo thing through the story of his career to not give someone who keeps calling his name out an opportunity.
I think the difference was, by the time he had gone on that super middleweight run, right, he had just kind of beaten Billy Joe Saunders, that era, that was when the fight made the most sense. And right when the fight made the most sense, he took the risk and fought Bivol. And he didn't win that fight. And I think that the potential for him and Benavidez at that point, that's when it really went away. And I also think the fight was less appealing by that time, but still one that we would have wanted to see. Still one that I think would have been a great fight, and a fight that other people in his position, I think about other legends, I feel like would have taken it.
Yeah, it's a weird thing that's always going to be brought up. So what is Canelo's legacy?
It is a little stain on his legacy for sure.
Well, it's just because it's like here's the other great fighter that everyone's saying this guy's an exciting fighter. He's a Mexican-American fighter. It's the up-and-comer who Mexican fans have really taken to. You're the fighter that represents Mexico. Not saying it would have been a passing of the torch because Canelo could have won it, but it was a fight that seemed like it would make a lot of money and generate a lot of excitement. And the fact that the fight never happened, it always rubbed me the wrong way.
It rubbed me the wrong way too. I think ultimately, if there is any drawback to Canelo's career, or if there is a stain on the legacy, it's not any of his fights. It's that fight not happening.
What do you think of Canelo's legacy after this? Does this diminish some of his legacy, losing to basically a welterweight? A smaller fighter comes up at this point in his career. He has a loss to Bivol. He has a loss to Crawford and a Floyd Mayweather. They're all potentially Hall of Fame boxers, but does losing to a much smaller man at this point impact how you look at him?
It doesn't particularly. I think Terence is really special. I can't think of anybody building their body up that amount of weight that successfully, being that durable, being that strong in the pocket, being that strong in the clinches, right? Not getting muscled around and pushed around. I think the fight is more about how special Terence is, and Canelo being 35, being, nearly 70 fights into a career, right? I'm looking this morning at 63, 3-2 with 39 knockouts. He's an all-time great, bro. I think it now is a perfect time to wrap it up if he felt so inclined.
My question to you too is, with Usyk, he took a piece of Tyson Fury. I think he took a little bit of him. I'm not sure we ever see Tyson Fury again because I think that second Usyk fight really did some damage to Fury, where I think he questions some things about what he's doing in the ring. I kind of think Crawford's going to have some long-term damage on Canelo moving forward because he's the type of fighter that we've seen has kind of like killed guys' confidences. If Canelo keeps going, I personally think we're going to see him start to diminish, not because he's getting worse per se, but I think that this fight is going to have an impact on him.
Yeah, those are the moments that kind of separate certain types of great fighters, right? Like some of I use him as an example because it's the most recent, I think, fair comparison, but some of Manny Pacquiao's best moments are coming off of losses. And those are the moments that amplify your greatness. And there's an opportunity there, I think, for Canelo to come back from a loss and to have a defining win. And those types of comebacks elevate your legacy. But again, if both of them retired right now, I have no issue with it. What else do they have left to prove?
Yeah, to me, I almost think this is the perfect send-off for both guys.
Or do it again. I have no issue with them doing it again. What we talk about boxing being a business, right? Like, go get another big bag of money and put on a fight with each other out,
I guess my thing is, and this could lead into another segment about the belts, but I'm fine with them doing it again, but I don't think they need to contest it for the titles. I think that guys that we saw, up-and-comers like Christian Mbilli and Lester Martinez, deserve their chance to compete for the belts, to make a name for themselves. I think this is such a big fight, it doesn't need a belt per se. It needs to just happen.
I see that, but I also, if it was done in, not that I don't think it will be, but if it was done in like a timely manner, I think Terence has earned the right to defend those belts.
What did you think of the telecast? What did you think of the belts, the segment about the Ring Magazine belt, the way belts were used? Any observations?
I'm not remembering exactly what you're referencing specifically.
Well, no, there was pre-fight drama about people saying, "Oh, will the belts be there? Will they not be there?" Because there's such an emphasis on this Ring Magazine belt. Did you feel anything different about this production that's different from a traditional boxing broadcast?
It's different. Well, we're in a non-traditional era, Lukey. I think tradition in boxing, what role that serves is shifting and changing, some for the better and some for the worse, and we can get into what those things are. But what makes it different ultimately is not, the fighters are always the fighters. They're the best part. They're so incredible that, they take the weird place that boxing is in right now in 2025 and still make it a memorable night. And so there's nothing to take away from the fighters. But if you have a starting point that you want to start with on that, but I think
Not just that. Let's go, and we're gonna read the comments. We're gonna read the comments in a second, but I want to go to the co-feature, Callum Walsh, Fernando Vargas Jr. What are your thoughts, Dakota?
It was a good fight, man. It's too bad the judges didn't watch it. I mean, I felt like Fernando kind of overperformed. I thought he was really impressive because I thought, man, Callum Walsh, I just almost said Callum Simpson. Walsh, I thought, was really smooth in his approach, and you could see like what Max was saying, you could see that that amateur pedigree, that difference in experience for sure. But I thought Fernando won 3 or 4 rounds and gave a really good accounting of himself. And I don't remember, Fernando Jr. might be the only Vargas boy that I've never seen fight. So I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew he was the one that started late and was the oldest. And I was really impressed with him, man. And the difference was, Walsh was able to maintain it for longer. But I thought it was a great fight.
So I thought that it was a good contender fight, a good separating prospects. I thought Fernando did win 4 rounds. I thought that it was a disappointing performance for Callum Walsh. He's had a lot of hype. He was put in a co-main event spot. And this just, quite frankly, didn't feel like a co-main event level fight. This felt like a type of fight that should be an opener. I get why probably Mbilli and Lester Martinez, which we're about to talk about in a second, wasn't, because Bomac is the coach of Lester Martinez and he's the coach of Crawford. So logistically, you probably want a fight in between. But I think that it was just a disservice to the fighters that you have kind of a championship level fight. You kind of had that on this TV card that I was getting into. You start with this fighter, Mighty Mo. He's solid, right? But he's just not really a pay-per-view or a main card fighter. He's just not ready for that level. And then you go into Lester and Mbilli, and you go, wow, this is a good fight. And then you go to Callum Walsh versus Fernando Vargas, and it's a good TV opener. but it's not a co-main event. And you just see that difference, especially like when I Just Want the Truth goes Brandon Adams versus Callum Walsh, 12 round, the winner gets Sander. I mean, Brandon Adams versus Serhii Bohachuk might have been one of the best. I don't know what's a better fight, Mbilli versus Martinez or Brandon Adams versus Bohachuk. But the fact that Brandon Adams' fight was on a YouTube stream and only the hardcore of hardcore fans saw it, and 2 of the 4 fights on the main card kind of were, fights where guys didn't separate.
This is what, and that's part of, some of the weirdness that we're not addressing directly about the telecast, but it was obvious that, Callum, having fought on UFC Fight Pass for the last couple of years and being billed as sort of the main event fighter of 360 Promotions on UFC Fight Pass, that's why the fight's there. It's not because of the quality of the matchup, because that, they were calling Bohachuk and Adams the prelim headliner. That's the fight that should have been the prelim headliner, is Walsh and Vargas, and Adams and Bohachuk should have opened up the telecast, and Billy and Martinez should have been the co-main.
Yeah, or you could have just had Brandon versus Bohachuk as the co-main, because once again, there's that logistical issue with Bomac where you have it. But to me, I think that's the disservice, is the placement this fight was on the card makes it hard for people to objectively look at the fight as a fight, because it was presented as a co-feature on a huge card. And I think that it's hard to separate where something is. If you're the co-feature on a big card, it's hard to separate the placement your fight is with that it's a developmental fight amongst 2 up-and-coming prospects. I think that's the problem. If it was on a different place, I think people go, okay, Callum Walsh, he got some experience. Fernando Vargas Jr. showed that he can compete at a very high level. But I think that, Walsh is going to receive some criticism because he was put in this spot high on the card, and he's just not jumping off the page yet as kind of like, I see that championship pedigree in him yet.
We need a good nickname, bro. We need a good nickname.
Well, it's King Callum. That's his nickname.
That's not going to do it, bro. I need my Callums and my Liams and my Walshes and my Smiths and my Simpsons. Boys, you got to get good nicknames.
So Callum Simpson must be your least favorite because he's a Callum and he's a Simpson.
Oh, I got Liam Simpson. I got Callum Walsh. I got Callum Smith. I got Liam Wall. I can't. I need you guys to get good fucking nicknames, please.
Okay, so now we're going to read some of the comments. Hope you all had a great night working. I'll catch the replay. Thank you, Bipolar Boxing. Appreciate you. Wheelchair Man John, good card last night overall. Turkey did good for us. I agree with you. Adams should have been on the main card. I Just Want the Truth. They didn't want to take away from the main event. Well, that could be true too, but I think that when you
think a good co-main event never takes away from the main event. It elevates the main event.
Did last night's card change your expectations of TKO? I'm a boxing fan, so I'm just excited for more boxing products. I'm an equal opportunist, so I'll call a good fight and a bad fight a bad fight. So far, it's the only criticism I have, and it's been with a lot of these Riyadh season cards, they just go on way too long. The pacing is just way too slow. Last night it was too slow. I remember we thought the fight was going to happen earlier. It ended up going all the way to 2 a.m. East Coast time. Let's get into Lester Martinez versus Christian Mbilli.
I got to respond to that question too. No, you want to keep it moving because I'm going to go for a couple minutes.
Sure, go for it.
No, it's fine.
What were you going to say?
Did it change my expectations of TKO? I think that they're capable of putting on a good boxing production product, but the undercurrent of a multimillionaire who's close with politicians in Dana is trying to repeal the Ali Act, which you guys can go and look up for yourselves. It's a very important piece of legislation that protects boxers on a variety of fronts, economic and promotional. And they want to take that away because they want to be able to create a sort of a dictatorship where the ratings are what Dana and Turkey want them to be. They don't have to justify that in any way, the way that the sanctioning bodies do. And, we saw Eric Raskin's piece last week, right? Like anybody who has any sort of concerns about sport washing or about the source of the financing or about what these guys are trying to do behind the scenes to change the game for their own personal advantage, not for the advantages of the fighters, that's all still there. So regardless of what kind of boxing product they put on, that's the end game. And I don't think anybody's going to feel any different about that. If they were worried about it before this, I don't think the way he responded to Sean Zettel is making anybody feel better.
Also, editorial note: the views of this show are not of the show itself. Those are Dakota's views. We each take our own individual stances, so that's just a little editorial note. Lobster 11 says, does that only apply to fighters who sign up to that league? We have no clue because nothing's come out, so we have no idea. Nothing's finite. Nothing's there. As you say, you're a blue chip prospect from the amateurs, and you get other offers. You wouldn't sign up to that league. Look, I was doing an interview with a kid about an up and comer yesterday, and he's like, so when the guy turns pro, what's his pay going to be? And it's like he could be on a club show, or he could be on a undercard for a big promotion. You never know. And like there's no finite path. QT said perfectly placed disclaimer. Lukey always gets those good disclaimers in. I agree with that. I'm on the East Coast. I was thinking, man, when is this thing going to get going? Speaking of getting going, why don't we go to Christian and Mbilli-Lester Martinez?
Man, true fight of the year contender right there, boy. I mean, that was incredible. And this will be the last thing I say on it, but wouldn't that be horrible if those two guys only made 15% of what the fight was worth? Wouldn't that be terrible?
Well, I don't know the economics of it. I don't know the structure of it. I've kind of stayed away from that stuff in my sporting career. I've tried to stay in the sport lane. To me, what I think Mbilli was someone that I didn't respect enough on his come up. And I absolutely love his fighting style. I love the way he forces a fight, makes a fight. God, is he fun. And Lester Martinez kind of was what I expected. A Danny Garcia-like guy, planted his feet. As the fight went on, I had never seen Mbilli that tired in a fight, that he had pushed the pace.
I don't think he's been in with anybody that can truly match pace with him, right? Like even Derevyanchenko, who gave him a great fight, was just kind of coming in second because he couldn't quite maintain that tempo. And Lester was able to match it really at every turn. There was shifts in momentum, there was shifts in activity, but like Lobster 11 said, and Billy's a machine. And so you'd think largely at some point, unless somebody's just going to straight up outbox him, that they're not going to be able to keep up with that engine he's got. And Lester did. And that's why it kind of felt like the draw was the only logical outcome.
Lobster 11, one hell of a fight, total war. I thought that was the best fight of the night over the Adams fight. And then Lobster 11 said, Mbilli is a machine. Loved the Mbilli fight. I thought Lester eked it out, though. Whatever happens with boxing, I hope that he has money behind him. Narrative dies.
I agree.
Yeah, I would watch a rematch between the two. Sadly, it was a draw. I think there's
Please, can we get a rematch? Please, can we get a rematch of that?
But I think there's a hidden blessing in it. What if we get a rematch and it's for a vacant title? What if one of the titles what if the WBC title is vacated by Crawford, maybe, and we could get Lester Martinez versus Christian Mbilli for an outright title? This is a type of fight that felt like it should have been for an outright title. And I feel like a rematch, given the first fight, there could be a hidden blessing, and it could produce a Louis Crocker, Paddy Donovan 2 type fight where a good contender bout turned into an exciting storyline into a vacant title.
I think that you're right, but for me, this is sometimes where I feel a little different about undisputed champions. I have no issue with somebody because it's such a difficult thing to do in boxing. I feel like somebody that earns that position has earned the right to defend it, and just kind of putting a belt in the mix. You know, that's some of when you know, the people at TKO talk about the belts not serving a championship purpose. That's kind of what they're talking about, where you just throw a belt in the mix to up the significance. But what is the significance of the belt? And I feel like right now the belts belong to Terence, and until he wants to do something with them, I just think that's fair.
So I think this is the most exciting episode we've ever had, because I disagree. I think that once you get to undisputed, you've kind of earned your spot, and then we all know you're the guy. So I think that a belt can be taken from you because you're the guy. And there's young fighters that are out there that need opportunities to get the belt to kind of rise up. And you're quite clearly the best person in the division. So I'm of the belief that I like seeing when there's undisputed a belt or two come loose, because it kind of restarts the division, like what we're seeing in welterweight and what we'll probably see in super middleweight, because undisputed often creates big log jams at the top. And when this one undisputed champion, and if they choose to vacate a belt or two, it kind of reignites a division and brings a lot of enthusiasm around young fighters. So I'm of the belief that I like when someone's there and they're going to target super fights. They don't feel the need to covet each and every belt.
The concept of undisputed, it really only works in practicality in real life if said undisputed champion is just like, I'm going to take the number one contender once a year from each belt. You had 4 fights every year and there was a schedule. That's a way that it would work, I think, more practically. I think what you're saying is correct. But to me, when somebody becomes undisputed, unless they retire or they outright drop the belts because they're going to change weight classes, it's like, I want to see the Terence defend the undisputed position. That's interesting to me.
I get what you're saying. For me personally, I've seen too many people be undisputed. And when guys are undisputed, typically they fight once a year, at most twice a year. And there's 8 to 10 people in a contender spot. And then they typically are strategically moving to not fight each other. So we're getting a lot of interesting fighters taking lateral moves, waiting for an opportunity. And it just makes boxing as a whole uninteresting. And for me personally, maybe the word's lineal, but like, I don't look at these guys as not undisputed. Even if they don't have the belt, it's like they're continuing their legacy. I just feel like from a practicality standpoint, the longer guys are undisputed and the less active they are, the more it just slows things down. And you just have guys that just aren't able to kind of get into these positions. Like, I think that's hurt David Benavidez, Canelo being undisputed, because he hasn't gotten chances at belts, and there's been many various guys. So that's just my take.
I don't even necessarily see anything wrong with what you're saying. I don't think the way boxing is set up, staying undisputed for a long period of time, but I do believe that undisputed champions should have the opportunity to defend that position at least once.
Well, I think the way to do it would be to create, and I know you probably won't like this idea, but to have like an emeritus champion. So you have the title. You're like you were the guy that won like the middleweight title. So you're the middleweight emeritus champion, but there needs to be like an active outright champion. So you have like this honorary thing because you became undisputed, and until you lose or you move a weight class, you can defend the undisputed crown because of your achievement. Sure. But there seems to be a way that we need to go to move on, because the interim belts never feel as fulfilling to me. And our guy Jesus M is in here. Fake Nello, non-competitive versus elite boxers, easy work by Crawford. I agree with both points, says QT. Personally, I think Canelo is an outlier who had the support of the sanctions to keep the belts that long. I mean, we can debate about that stuff for as long as it is. I just know that Mbilli versus Lester Martinez is probably the best fight of the year, unless we get a really good fight. And I think it vaulted both fighters to another level. I think it moved their name up to exciting people want to see.
It definitely moved up Lester's. I don't know. It as much as it was a great fight, it feels like logistically maybe it's a lateral move for Mbilli, who's a number one contender type of guy. Lester, we know him, right? But he's not a ranked guy. He hasn't been around as much. And so I thought at least it felt like the expectation was that Mbilli is going to win a tough fight and it's going to keep him in his position. So while I think it elevates Lester, I'm not sure if it elevates Mbilli other than endearing him to the fans.
So Jesus M says Lester versus who? You got to do the rematch, bro. You got to do the rematch. It's a no-brainer. You got to do the rematch. It's a great fight. We got to do the rematch. I'd like to see it for the vacant title if possible. So then there could be a belt on the line. But I'll tell you, I had a lot of friends that watch this card that don't typically watch boxing and go, who's this Mbilli guy? This is my guy. So it might not have done stuff for the hardcore fan, but a lot of random people watching this card to see the main, they tuned in and they're like, Mbilli's someone I want to keep watching. So I think he did win over some new eyeballs because it felt like a lot of people were like, why haven't you ever told me about this guy?
Yeah, well, he's kind of one of boxing's best kept secrets, and he helped uncover another one of boxing's best kept secrets in Lester.
Let's talk about our final fight from this card. Brandon Adams-Serhii Bohachuk. What were your thoughts?
Man, I mean, if it wasn't on Terence Crawford moving up 20 pounds to beat Canelo undercard, I mean, that would have been the performance of the night. Brandon Adams coming off of a loss and multiple bouts of inactivity, beating Serhii Bohachuk wide. I mean, winning 8 to 10 rounds of a 10-round fight, winning wide, out hustling him every round, just being sharper. And it was a great fight where Bohachuk was just sort of coming in second. And since they fought, the career trajectories have been different, right? Brandon's had a hard time staying active. He's picked up a couple losses. Bohachuk has lost to Virgil, but it was in a true flip a coin fight. Great fight with Brian Mendoza, who knocked out Fundora. So the trajectories have been different. And so it felt like, okay, Brandon won the first one. So this is kind of a 50-50. And he just absolutely separated himself, man. It was spectacular.
Couple of notes. Brandon's always been really good. I feel like he's been a hidden gem that people haven't appreciated because he hasn't gotten to be as active as he should have been. He goes Boxino, Contender, pops up on Ring City. It's just he hasn't had that activity and familiarity. Hopefully that changes. The fluidity in his body shots in this fight was something to see. Just so fluid. Bohachuk's warrior spirit was something. I have a fight that I'd like to see. I think Callum Walsh versus Serhii Bohachuk is the next fight to make. Because Walsh had a fight in the co-main. It wasn't the most exciting, but it was a good prospect fight. I have a feeling, and this is just a guess, I think Virgil Ortiz takes something out of guys. And when you fight Virgil Ortiz, you lose a bit of yourself. And I think we're starting to see that with Serhii is he fought Virgil close, but Virgil does long-term damage to guys. You get into wars with him and you start to slow down. It's hard for me to not think the Virgil Ortiz rule might be in effect there. And Brandon Adams is a real contender. He's a real contender. He's a top guy. It's really interesting when a fight of the year contender has wide scorecards, because the scores weren't wrong for this fight, but it was one of the best fights we've seen all year.
100%. Serhii just came in second, man. And I like the Callum Walsh fight. I like that fight.
For Serhii or for Brandon?
For Serhii. I think Brandon's worthy of a top 10.
I like him versus if he could get the Boss Barreyu fight. That would be kind of a cool fight. The guy
it feels like he kind of earned,
he's a world champion, Dakota.
That's what I'm saying. He's sort of earned the Virgils. He's earned the Madrimovs. He's earned Jesus Ramos. So, any of these, tremendous guys at 154, I think, and hell yeah, I was disappointed in Ditchko, man. That was, I really liked that matchup. I've thought both of those guys were really good in the past. If there was a dud on the night, it was certainly that one. And Ditchko not closing the show strong, like kind of limping to the finish line with Franklin coming on at the end. And Franklin, I mean, I don't know what happened there, man. It was wild. He's had all this experience, 12 rounds with Joshua that are competitive, probably beats Dillian White. And I didn't really understand what either of them were going for.
Yeah. Now we got to talk about your boy Naoya Inoue today. Beat MJ. Once again, kind of a vintage Inoue performance. He fights someone who's really, really credentialed, really acclaimed, and just outclasses him. I mean, this is just a throwback to what Inoue was doing early in his career. Pretty darn impressive stuff by Inoue. Comes
Incredible.
off of being dropped twice, like fairly recently. People doubting him. He fights one of the toughest challenges in the division. And I would say it was completely uncompetitive. What would you say?
It was competitive, but it was wide. Like I felt like Akhmadaliev really fought a good fight, man. And Inoue is just more special. He's just more explosive. He's able to transition more quickly. His feet are better. Like MJ is a great thinking man's fighter who gave Inoue a good 12 rounds, and I think maybe he got 2 rounds out of it. You know, I think it's interesting because over the last few years, or maybe the last year or so, I've heard you say like pretty certainly that you feel that Inoue is fading. And I
think
don't
he
see
is. I think he is. Like, to me, this isn't the
I
best
don't
version
see
of
it,
Inoue.
man.
But I
I,
don't
I,
think you saw the best version of Inoue. Were you watching those real performances 2017 to 2019?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I was in on him early, and I see him taking the absolute best guys that he can find in the division and kind of dominating. But I felt like Akhmadaliev was very competitive on a round to round basis. He just wasn't quite at the level of an all timer.
So, Wheelchair John said 2 of the top fighters in the world fought this weekend, top 3, I should say, and they Top Rank had it on Facebook. I'm not mad at that, and I'll tell you why. How many weeks do we have fights on paywalls and platforms? If a promoter is going to give us a world-class fight and it's free, I'm not mad at that. Where I start to get mad is if we hit another paywall and another paywall. I'd much rather have it be on a niche social media platform where we don't pay for it than have it hidden behind a paywall.
I think my biggest issue with it is the ease and proximity of being able to view it on a large screen. When I think about like the best fights or the best fighters of a generation, I don't want to watch those on a tablet. I want to be able to really see it. And when you put it on a social media platform, it sort of convolutes that viewing experience.
And then after the fight,
Just
and for
opinion.
people asking, he calls out Junto Nakatani. That's the fight we want to see, right? It's the modern great Japanese fighter against the Japanese legend. You know, these guys, we call it a man fight. They're both going to want the fight because they got that competitive itch. We're working to it. I feel like it's going to happen maybe March. Doesn't it feel like February, March? We're building to that. Nakatani, I believe, has a fight already set up. That's pretty cool. That Inoue fights someone as good as MJ, has a vintage performance, and immediately is calling out probably the most treacherous guy once again. I feel like Inoue is going to fight.
I'm not seeing the decline. Maybe he's not because I don't see the same limitations that I saw like in Canelo, where you can see there's just things he's not doing anymore. This guy's still doing a little of this, a little of that. The feet are bouncy, the legs look good. Like I'm just seeing everything's clicking. And as you move up in weight and you only fight top 5 guys, like it's not all gonna go seamlessly. Maybe when he was down a couple pounds lower and he got, knockouts over Jamie McDonnell, and those were all tremendous, but I see a guy who continues to be at the absolute peak of his game. Same with Terence. I see a maintenance of that.
So with Inoue, I think he had a lot of attributes we don't see in lower level fighters. He kind of had attributes Terence Crawford had: explosion, power, timing. Like normally in those lower weights, we get some combination, but we don't see a guy that has the total package. He kind of had a lightweight, welterweight, middleweight skill set, all-time great, but at these lower weight classes, and was doing guys dirty early in his career. To me, it feels like this version of Inoue is the thinking man's urge. Inoue, he's like almost in his Money Mayweather, where I don't think he's able to burst and explode as much, but now he's walking guys into shots. He's very cerebral. He's got good snap on his punches. To me, this is like probably a smarter, better version of himself. In this fight, he was less risk adverse. He has a tendency where like he takes chances to a fault. But I mean, that being said, it's like you're talking about like an all-time great maybe going to an excellent fighter. Like this is not like, I'm just saying he's not looking like that same in a way that from a few years ago where he was fighting top contenders and making them look like nobodies. Like even with
maybe that's
like with Fulton, he made Fulton look like he wasn't a world-class fighter.
I think Akhmadaliev is better than Fulton, though. That's an opinion thing. So it's a matter of how you're perceiving the opponent. I think Akhmadaliev is a really tricky, versatile guy that was just second best at everything. And so it's hard for me to go, oh, you know, the guy that moved up from 105 pounds is now doing this to the top guy at 122, but he's not laying him out the way he was, you know, 15 pounds lower.
Speed round. Ricky Hatton just passed away. Very sad. What's your best Ricky Hatton moment?
God, man, I really loved when Ricky would put on that fat suit. That shit was just a good time. Ricky Hatton was a good hang, and I don't know exactly what happened, but that shit broke my heart, bro. Love me some Ricky Hatton.
I'd say for me, what I liked about Ricky was the sincerity. It really felt like win or lose, Ricky connected with British fans. And honestly, I think he's the British fighter that connected the most with American fight fans in the history of boxing, because he's just so genuine. And I think that you could tell he was gutted in the loss. He came and you knew that he gave it as much as he could. And I think there was something so human about Ricky Hatton, from his fighting style to the way he approached a fight, that you kind of had to be a dick to not like Ricky Hatton. Like he just was so, you knew a Ricky Hatton in some sort. Like it's like that was the thing that made him special. To me, obviously, people are always going to look at the fights that didn't go his way. But to me, I'll always remember that Costa Zoo fight and just thinking about like how I didn't give him a chance. And to see this guy with this style that everyone thought could get exposed beat someone that I never imagined would lose in that fashion. I think that speaks to his folklore. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times people look at the Louis Collazo fight and other fights. And when he came to America, he didn't have that success.
Yeah. A fighter's life is not easy, bro. You know, you see pictures of him. He's 46 years old. You know, he's not that much older than we are, right? But he kind of looks like he could be my fucking father. I mean, it's a hard life, man. And I know he did his fair share of partying, and you know, I think it's just sad, man. It's just sad, and I don't want to make any assumptions about what happened. But Ricky's had his struggles.
Let's leave it there, because we don't know if his family's watching, and we don't need to say anything. Let's let the reporters report, and we'll leave it at that. We don't know the news, and it's very, very sad, and we really respect.
Yeah, just to be clear, I'm not making any assumptions. It's just sad to me. It's just sad.
So, let's talk real quickly. Luis Crocker beats Paddy Donovan. You kind of called this one. It was a horrible fight. Crocker drops Donovan twice. Took the Adonis Stevenson approach to this fight. Wide stance, loads up on a right hand. I actually scored it for Donovan, but I'm not mad that he lost, because the whole second half of this fight was terrible. It was just two guys waiting. No one was being first. It was ripe for a draw or a bad decision. Crocker landed the 2 knockdowns, which I guess was the difference. But I will also say it lacked the urgency of a fight that was a world title fight. It reminded me a lot of Mike Jones versus Randall Bailey, which is kind of my quintessential world title fight that lacked urgency. Any thoughts on this?
It's not a shocker. I never I didn't see the fight, so I don't want to make any, sweeping statements about it. But in general, I've never been like wowed by Paddy Donovan in the same way that others have. It's not to say he's a tremendous fighter, but on the telecasts that I've watched of him, there's this thinking that there's potential that he's the best welterweight in the planet. I've just never seen that guy, and it felt just based on the result that maybe that's playing out.
I just think he's a hard luck fighter. I mean, I think that the first fight he was dominating Crocker, hits him after the bell, knockout, DQ. This fight, it looked like Crocker surprised him waiting to counter, and he just didn't really adjust, besides just lowering his punch output and pressuring him. Pretty much all the ringside judges on the DAZN telecast had it for Donovan. I had it for Donovan. They didn't. I wouldn't say it didn't show me that Donovan isn't a world-class fighter. it just showed me that he got surprised and he fought a really boring fight. And now he has 2 losses in 2 controversial fashions. And it's up to him to show us how mentally strong he is to bounce back from this.
Yeah, I definitely don't see Crocker, as like a long-standing champion. But you did a great short the other day talking about the state of the welterweight division. I think him having a belt kind of speaks to that, where it's a division that's in a transitional period. There isn't a defined top guy. And so we're kind of, there's different guys getting thrown into the mix here. And, Lewis Crocker has never blown me away either. He's great. But him as a world champion, it sounds weird to me.
Oh, it's like you got Lewis Crocker, you got Mario Barrios, you got Rolly Romero, and Brian Norman Jr. Norman's probably the most distinguished of them,
Really?
we would say. But it wouldn't shock me if like a Teofimo Lopez or somebody moved up in weight, or Devin Haney beats Norman, and then all of a sudden he tries to become undisputed at this weight class. It looks like a very vulnerable division currently. Like it looks like if there was a superstar fighter dangling around 135, 140 that feels comfortable at welterweight, they could move to this division and possibly pick up a belt. I mean, I think there's a chance that Manny Pacquiao could be an undisputed champion at this division currently if he won the right fights.
I tell you who I think could do it real quick is Richardson Hitchens. I don't really think there's too many people at welterweight that are going to be able to deal with what he brings.
And I think the 2 toughest fights currently are Rolly and Norman. I think those are the 2 hardest fights in that division. Those are the guys. Just last thing, what did you think of the fight week cards, the Wednesday and the Thursday card?
Well, I wasn't able to catch him this week, brother. You're going to have to take the lead on those.
They were okay. The Anthony Olascuaga, WBO flyweight champion, he had a good fight. Looks like he might turn into something. Stops a guy in 2 rounds. Camacho. Justin Viloria gets a high-profile fight. The guy moved a lot. It showed Viloria, he's not super comfortable with guys that move around and stuff. Developing fighter. Still needs some work, I thought Jalil Hackett had a good performance. He punches with people, gets a stoppage. The first week, there was a Mickey, I think his name's Mikey Talon. He had a standout performance defeating Christian Robles. But the Wednesday fight card had a lot of guys that I was very unfamiliar with. And that's pretty crazy when it's me, because normally I'm excited and I lack the enthusiasm.
Well, are you talking about the 8 unspoken rules?
No, that's Thursday night's card. The eight
rules
of Underground, I believe it was.
Yeah. The 8 rules of pleasing the big man.
The final thing we will talk about is the Golden Boy card coming up, which this week kind of, I mean, it's fine, right? Because we're coming off a big fight week. It's okay to have a lull, but this is what I'd call a traditional, more or less showcase card. We got Gabriela Fendora in the co-feature. She's taking on a new opponent, Alexis Kabecki. Can't say her name. I know I saw her at the WBC Women's Summit earlier this year. So Fendora's back. Fendora is one of the most exciting people in boxing, in my opinion. She's one of the most accomplished. She has a chance to be one of the greatest women's boxers ever. She's taking on a fighter who's willing to take on the challenge on whatever notice. We don't know how long ago she chose to take the fight, but she took the fight on short camp. And then we have my guy, Oscar Collazo, who I think is a special fighter, but we have no friggin' clue what this division is. He's taking on a guy named Jason Vason. I've never seen him fight. It's kind of the state of it's kind of the name of the division. I might have said it wrong because it rhymes. But it's just a sick
name, dude. You gotta admit, when a guy's got a first and a last name that rhymes, that's pretty tight.
But like this speaks to kind of the predicament Collazo's in. He's a lower weight fighter who has elements of Finito Lopez, who's capable of, and that is his name, by the way. I didn't get it wrong. He's capable of possibly being one of the best fighters in the world. But there is a level of, we don't know a thing about this division. And maybe that speaks to our incompetence. But I think that it's not just us. It's a lot of people. And sadly, whether it's right or wrong, he has to at some point move up in divisions so we can see him against some of these more interesting names. And given that he has so much power, one would hope that might start happening soon. but I'm always excited to see him because in the back of my mind, I go, is this guy maybe a pound for pound guy? And I just don't understand how good the division is. So it's him and Fundora in two interesting fights. And that's kind of where we're at.
Because it feels like Collazo, if he's not going to move up, then the path is like you have to become a long-standing champion like Ivan Calderon was, you know, when I first started watching boxing. And, you know, he was champion for, I mean, at least 5 years, and the reign became the legacy, the length of the reign, the fact that there wasn't anybody at 105 that could touch him for so long. That's what separated him. So if he's not going to move up, it feels like that's you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, that's kind of what he's doing, but it's like, for me, he might be a pound for pound guy, but there's no way I can put him there unless there's duration of title defenses and we have something. We also have Las Vegas had never seen an overseas fighter bring 10,000 fans. Crawford looked unbeatable. Who's next? What's next? I mean, I think the next fight just has to be a mega fight. I think he's going to retire, Duval, said Wheelchair John. Manny, #trash. I don't really want to see Manny versus Crawford. That's doesn't make sense at this point. I mean, when guys fight, the fights themselves make themselves. So if someone announces themselves and gets themselves to a big stage, a Hamzat Shiraz, one of these up-and-comers, Canelo, Benavidez, the fights make themselves. Fights appear. Right now, Crawford is the man. Crawford had a great performance. If we just sit back and watch fights, good fights will make themselves. Undercard for this card, we got Gael Cabrera, good up-and-comer. We got my guy Grant Flores. I'm pretty high on Grant Flores. By the way, big viewership right now. Can we hit that? Can you share this video? Tell a friend to tell a friend. Leave a comment. Got huge viewership in the chat. Everyone's watching, and they want to know about Joel Iriarte. Finally, before we get out of here, because of course now there's a ton of viewers and everyone's watching and they know.
Well, hopefully they go back and spend the last hour with us that we just did, because we really appreciate everybody in the chat. If you're just jumping in now, start this thing over, man. We're gonna wrap it up soon, and if you start it over now, you'll just be able to watch it, lickety split.
Yeah, it's gonna be great, bro. And we appreciate all you and the viewership. Liam Paro's back. He's in an IBF welterweight eliminator against David Pappett. I honestly am not sure I've ever seen David Pappett fight. I'm not sure if this fight's available. If he wins, he becomes the mandatory for Lewis Crocker. One, I would assume, and maybe I'm making an ass out of myself when you assume, I would probably favor Paro over Crocker.
I would very much favor Paro, and I think he's the kind of guy that you're talking about, where a star type fighter from another division could come in and assert themselves. I think he could be that kind of guy.
So that's something to monitor this week. He's fighting Thursday, and then we got an OTX boxing card. One of which features Tiara Brown making her first WBC women's featherweight title defense. Big Tiara Brown.
Tiara.
Brian Gorman is also on the undercard. Good to see him. And our guy from Salita Promotions, Dimitri Salita, my guy. Brandon Moore versus DeAndre Savage. Good heavyweight fight on Friday. And I love the co-feature. Maybe I'm just a nerd, but Olivia Curry versus Kay Scott is a great, compelling matchup. Let me tell you why. Olivia Curry started boxing at 19 in college, doing Muay Thai kickboxing, turned into a boxer at some point, turns pro. Kay Scott has over 100 amateur fights, turned pro. I think she's 41 or 42 years old. Loses a fight to Delcy Robinson, I think is her name. Maybe I got the name wrong. So she's 4-1 now. Curry had fought Shadeja Green. That she took a step up fighting above her natural right to fight Shadeja. Went 10 rounds with Shadeja, obviously lost to Shadeja. And now they're fighting for a vacant title at the middleweight division. I think it's an interesting career trajectory, someone that learned on the job versus someone that has vast amateur experience. Honestly, bro, that might be my fight of the week.
Nice little sleeper of a fight of the week there, guy.
Dakota, anything you got to say? Because I got to get to a lunch. So tell me what you got to say.
Enjoy your lunch. That's what I have to say, my friend.
And where can people support you? Because we had a ton of people in the chat.
As always, guys, you can support me over at the Slip and Weave podcast. There's going to be some new, I know I've been saying this for a month now, but there's going to be new episodes coming soon. Check me out at ITR Boxing, and always check me out every weekend on the Lukey Show with my guy Lukey, one of the real ones in the game.
Boxing channels haven't given a shout out to the Hitman, brought more fans to Vegas than any U.S. fighter. Rob James, we did a segment about Ricky Hatton, and we love Ricky Hatton on this channel. Ricky Hatton was the man because there will only be one Ricky Hatton, and that's the way we're going to end the show. R.I.P. Ricky Hatton, one of the greatest of his era, and for me, a fighter that I'll always hold in high regard, not just because I got to interview him once, but because of the way he conducted himself in and out of the ring. He was a champion in the ring, but he never forgot from where he came from. And I think that that's why he had such a unique connection with the fans. A lot of guys become champions, but the fans don't love them as much as Ricky Hatton. Ricky is one of a kind, and Ricky, you will be forever missed. And we're deeply saddened. He was really, people throw that title around prematurely. Ricky was the people's champion because when you were in Vegas, when he fought Floyd, I went there. You saw guys that said, I went to school with Ricky Hatton, best fighter in the world. And they're walking around proud. They go, Ricky, there you go, Ricky. And Ricky would walk, and they had the MGM security, and people just wanted to walk near him and go, there's only one Ricky Hatton. And they were screaming. And it was, you just don't see that. Right. And it's like that comes from the man he was. So deeply saddened about that. And let's see. Thank you came from the estate like the rest of us. We really appreciate. Thank you, Manchester legend. You know, me and Dakota might do a special podcast this week about our memories. Much love. Subscribe to your channel. Thank you for subscribing. We might do a tribute to Ricky Hatton this week. I'm tempted to do a Ricky Hatton tribute show. Or maybe we'll do that next week. We'll cover the fights, but maybe we'll do the Ricky Hatton tribute show and talk through the fights. What do you think, last minute, Dakota? What's your thoughts on that?
I think that he's a character that deserves to be highlighted. And like you said, the term the people's champion is sort of a fun, loose term, but Ricky really felt like a man of the people. He never felt like a guy who felt like he was above the people that came to support him. And that's why we loved him so much, man. We felt like we knew somebody like him. We felt like we could relate to him. He was he felt like a real working man. And
okay, well, rest in peace, Ricky Hatton. We are done this week.